There's a lot we don't know about the human remains that were found in the backyard of this home in northwest Detroit. This is an area we're talking about. Take a look. Construction workers made the discovery at a home on Woodingham. It's not far from the intersection of Livernois and 8 Mile.
So about 1 o'clock this afternoon, we were alerted by a construction crew of possible human remains found in the rear of this location here in the 19,000 block of Woodingham. Our units responded and confirmed that we identified some human remains partially buried. Someone small in stature, we don't know yet of sex, age, or anything of that nature, but we again are here investigating this. In addition to the Detroit Police Department's homicide unit, we have our partners from the FBI, our missing persons unit, and some additional resources here to again begin this investigation, first by exhuming the remains, then from that identifying who this individual was, and then the person responsible for this.
How does the FBI help in these types of investigations?
Well, the FBI brings a plethora of resources, certainly from the anthropologic lens, certainly from the intelligence lens, as they're able to see if possibly anyone else was missing in the area. So again, they are an incredible partner and will help us expedite solving this issue or this matter.
Around what time did this all happen?
We received the call just after 1 p.m.
So this construction worker, is this house vacant? Were they working to remodel it?
That's correct. So this house was vacant and the crew here was there to do some renovations. My understanding is that while they were on the property, they noticed some damage, some siding peeling on the garage, and while looking in the area, they made the discovery and then alerted us.
Was that body wrapped in anything, or in what condition was it?
It looked to be, again, it was partially buried. It appeared to be it was in some type of burlap sack or blanket. That's what we were able to see at that time. Again, a lot of unknowns, but we'll be working here through the night to find that information.
Wondering, do you have any idea how long that body had been there?
We don't know.
But when you say human remains, was it decomposed? Was it still intact? Was it in a decomposition state?
So we were able to identify that these were human bones. So this was not skeletal remains that we found. So based on what we saw, we were definitely able to identify that they were human. So if you're asking the state of decomposition, what was exposed was not fully decomposed and gave our investigators here at the scene enough to go by and positively identify the remains as human.
Okay. Have there been any reports of anyone missing from this address or any nearby address?
Well, we're looking into that right now, sir.
What do you know so far? Like, what is known?
So known at this point is in the rear of this location just after 1 o'clock today. The Detroit Police Department was notified by some construction workers here at the location of the possible human remains. From that, we responded, identified them as human remains, contacted our partners in addition to our DPD resources, our homicide unit, our missing persons unit. Our partners from the FBI are here to assist us in this investigation. So one, we can find out who this person is, and then more importantly, the person, well, just as equally important, the person responsible for this, so that they can be criminally charged.
Okay, so you do think this is a criminal investigation as well?
It's too early to tell, but we are treating it as one.
Okay, and I'll ask, do you know who owns the home currently?
Our investigators are looking into that right now. It is our understanding that the owner is who hired the construction crew to renovate this property and prepare it for occupancy. So that is our working theory, and again, our investigators are going through that now to confirm that.
And I'm sorry if you've already answered this question as well, but the home was vacant though?
That's correct, it was unoccupied.
Right. What steps happen now with the medical examiner's office and taking a look at those bones?
Yep, so again, we talk about those resources that we have in addition to the FBI, but also the Wayne County medical examiners. We would bring in anthropologists, an expert in that field, so we can begin that identification process, whether it be through dental records, whether it be through possible DNA if that's able to be obtained, and then overlaying that with any missing person records should be able to get us a running start to find out who this person is. Sometimes it could be a lengthy process because if the person wasn't reported missing, then once we identify if in fact we do have dental records or their DNA on the database, then we would need to identify their family and start working. So I can in no way give you a length of time that this investigation will take, but extremely sad day, and we will exhaust our resources to hold the people accountable for this.
We've heard that there may be an excavator coming as well. Is it just one human person's remains? Are you expecting to find more, or is that unknown?
Yeah, well, when we talked about a ton of resources here, we had everything that we would possibly need on the scene. We did have an excavator here, but based on the space that we have, the excavator could not get in that space to do that. So we'll actually be making the exhumation by hand, and our partners here at the FBI will be leading that investigation as well.
That will take a while.
That will take a while. We will be out here for quite a bit. Thank everyone.
Construction workers stumbled upon the gruesome find. They were working at a vacant home in the area of Outer Drive in Livernois when the job took a shocking turn. Now police and the FBI are digging for clues to identify the person and the cause of death.
The fact that something like this could happen in what neighbors tell me is a quiet and peaceful part of town has everyone asking, how did this happen and who is it that was found?
It's sad. That's very sad because shouldn't anybody have to be found anywhere?
On a cold Monday afternoon, Detroit police say human remains were found near the garage of this home on St. Martin's and Woodingham Drive.
Identified some human remains partially buried. Someone small in stature. We don't know yet of sex, age, or anything of that nature.
Police say the home has been vacant for months. A construction crew was on site doing some renovating when around 1 p.m. they came across what they thought were human remains wrapped in some type of sack.
My understanding is that while they were on the property, they noticed some damage, some siding peeling on the garage, and while looking in the area, they made the discovery and then alerted us.
DPD's treating this as a criminal investigation. Michigan State Police, the FBI, and the Missing Persons Unit all on scene. Neighbors say a family used to live at the home, but not for at least over a year now. Nothing ever stood out to them, the entire ordeal coming as a complete shock.
I really hope they get closure, whoever it is. I hope they're able to get answers. If it's a family friend, I hope they get those answers.
And the investigation process is expected to be lengthy. The medical examiner's office has to build a profile as to who this could be. Detroit police have to see if anyone has been reported missing from the area and see how this individual died. Crews expected to be out here all throughout the night into the early hours of the morning.
Human remains were found within a Detroit neighborhood.
A construction crew making the gruesome discovery Monday at a vacant home on Woodingham Drive. This is near Outer Drive in Livernois on the city's west side.
DPD's homicide unit working to identify the remains.
According to police, the human remains were found near this garage. The person who called 911 said it appeared to be the foot of a child. A shocking discovery unearthing many questions.
Looks like human remains that's buried in the back of the house.
This quiet neighborhood, now loud with questions, after remains of what could be a child were found here Monday.
The mom and dad used to argue a lot, so the police would get called to kind of stop the dispute.
Neighbors tell me that they've frequently seen young children in and out of the home. They believe it to be a rental property. However, they say the last time they saw anyone here was this past November, and it has remained quiet until Monday.
Broke my heart. This has made me feel like I wanted to cry, like a lot.
How rare is it for a finding like this to happen?
Not as rare as you think.
Former Assistant Police Chief in Detroit, Steve Dolan, tells me he has, unfortunately, seen situations like this before. In this specific incident, DPD says the remains were found partially buried, wrapped in a type of sack, and are from a person small in stature. Dolan says right now investigators are most likely looking into any evidence found with them, such as DNA and...
Is there any clothing nearby that may identify this individual?
According to Dolan, what we learn next will depend on how long the body has been there. If it is less decomposed, findings will come sooner, potentially giving someone answers in a missing persons case and or unearthing not questions, but someone's crimes.
I'm sure if it takes a while, or if not already, people are already calling the police department saying, hey, I have a missing child, I have a missing son, I have a missing daughter.
Detroit police tell me that they expect an update on this case to come at some point this week.
Human remains were found at a home on the city's west side.
Police are on the scene in the 19700 block of Woodingham Drive. That's just north of Outer Drive.
It's all happening right here at this home that you see behind me. Now, there are several officers. There's also the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI is also here assisting in the investigation. Now, what we know right now is that they did find human remains in the back of this house. We also know that the house was abandoned. The homeowner of the house actually hired a construction crew to come in and make some repairs to the home, and they are the ones that found the body. Now, what we also just learned from the Detroit Police Department is that they brought an excavator into the area to try to get the body out of the ground. However, they were not able to successfully get into the backyard, so they're going to have to do it by hand. Now, we do know that the body is small in stature, but they weren't able to confirm whether or not it was an adult or a child. They also couldn't confirm whether or not it was a male or a female, but again, they are having to exhume this body by hand, and they said they will be out here all night and the investigation into finding out who exactly the body does belong to, that's also going to take some time. But the house, again, it was abandoned, and they said they would be out here all night.
Detroit police and the FBI are at this home. This is on Woodingham Street. This is where human remains were found behind the garage that we're now showing you. Police say they got a call around 1 this afternoon from a construction crew. They were working behind the house, and they noticed what appeared to be a foot sticking out of the ground. Further digging revealed what investigators believe to be a small body wrapped in a burlap sack. Detroit Police Department says it could take hours for crews to finish that digging, made more difficult by the cold conditions. The earth is now freezing. We're also told, in addition to the FBI, representatives from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children are helping with the investigation.
There is still a very active investigation on Detroit's west side. Human remains were found there earlier today, and now Detroit police are working with the FBI on this case.
The homeowner actually hired a construction crew to get the house ready for new tenants, but when that crew got to work, they found those human remains. And right now, authorities aren't able to say whether or not that human remains belonged to a male or a female or an adult or a child.
Well, I hope that it's not really human and someone is playing a cruel joke. I would just hope that.
Nadia Morris's hopes were crushed once she realized that it wasn't a cruel joke and that the home next door was now the site of an active crime investigation involving human remains. Those remains found by a construction crew hired by the home's owner to get the place ready for a new tenant to move in.
Very scary because you don't know if it's a child, adult, or somebody's over here doing things they're not supposed to. So.
Morris, who's lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, says that this house in particular had sat empty for about a year after the previous family, which had 2 parents and 5 children, suddenly moved out.
But nobody knew they left. They packed up in the middle of the night and just were gone the next day.
An abrupt departure that ended the chaotic scenes that Morris says that her and her neighbors would watch from their windows the entire time the previous family called this corner lot home.
We could hear them arguing, they would have the door open and it would just get so loud that neighbors would get concerned and actually call the police over there.
The only detail that Detroit police gave was that the remains belonged to someone who was small in stature, but they couldn't say how long they'd been there or give the gender or age of the victim. But they do say they're working diligently to remove every clue from this backyard that they can.
We'll actually be making the exhumation by hand. I can in no way give you a length of time that this investigation will take, but extremely sad day, and we will exhaust our resources to hold the people accountable.
Again, they say that they will be out there to get all of those remains out of that yard, but IDing that body could take several months.
Yes, about 1 o'clock this afternoon, the homeowner back behind us had a construction crew come out looking. He's trying to renovate the house so he can rent it. Upon their working, they discovered in a very shallow grave behind the garage what appeared to be a foot and part of a shin bone, not even a bone, shin sticking out of the ground.
And how would you classify the body? Is it wrapped in something? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it looks like it's wrapped into like a burlap bag of some sort. Small and frame structure. But as of right now, we don't know. We got our friends at the FBI here to help us. We're going to do an excavation as best we can. Not a lot of room back there, so it's going to just take some good old-fashioned muscle, some shoveling and stuff.
And talk about how the elements play a role in this situation as far as getting the body out and getting it kind of intact with the ground being cold.
Yeah, ground is frozen, obviously, and it's going to be a long night for the workers out here.
And how does the FBI help in this situation? What expertise do they bring to the table?
Everything. From missing and exploited children, we work in tandem with one of our task forces. Our missing persons unit is out here. Homicide is out here. We're reaching out to all of our partners to see what we can find and what we have here.
Realistically, what does it take for you guys to make some kind of at least generalized ID or assumption on who it is?
It's very early. It's going to be a while before we have any of that information.
Okay. And the construction crew that found them, were they digging back there? Or were they just kind of assessing the property?
Yeah, it appears that they're doing some work. There was some of the siding from the garage was peeling off the garage. I think they made their way back toward there, and you could see part of the ground was disturbed, and then you discovered the foot.
And if there is is the house, is anyone living there right now?
It's vacant now. The last person that lived there was left right at sometime in November. So a lot to do. It's very early on, but we're hopeful to have something later on tomorrow or even Wednesday.
Okay. And once the body is kind of retrieved, then what happens?
Yeah, then we got to figure out where the person came from, and it's a lot to this. It's going to be it's going to be tough for us, but we're going to work around the clock and hopefully get the body out as soon as we possibly can. We'd love the community's help. If you know of anyone that used to live there, missing, anything you can give us, we'd love the assistance.
And do you know if it's male or female that lived there?
Don't know.
Okay.
Nothing. I see is a foot at this point.
And take a look at what's going on behind me. You see the FBI and DPD working in tandem, trying to figure out what is going on out here. I'll take you back to a few hours ago when some construction workers were looking to make some renovations at this house off Woodingham, as you said, off Outer Drive near Livernois. And in the backyard, they were walking around kind of surveying the land a little bit, and they noticed a foot and a shin partially buried underneath, kind of behind the garage against the fence in sort of a tight area there. Now, the house is not occupied at this time. The last person to live there left in November.
It looks like it's wrapped into like a burlap bag of some sort. Small and framed structure, but as of right now, we don't know. We got our friends at the FBI here to help us.
Yeah, again, Detroit police, they don't know at this point if it's male, female, adult, or child. A lot of groups out here working to figure out who this person is. You have the Detroit Police Missing Persons Unit out here checking to see who has gone missing here in the last couple of months. And again, it was partially buried, partially decomposed. We asked the assistant chief there when they'll have even a guess of who this person is. They said it's very early on in this investigation. First of all, they have to get the body out, and because of these awful cold temperatures, they've brought in excavators, one you can maybe hear next to me, and they also have some tools trying to carefully get that body out of the partial grave, and then they'll be able to analyze and hopefully get an answer, at least in the coming days, of who we think this is.
No easy way to ask this question, but I imagine with the level of decomposition, that's going to be determined in terms of how they can kind of access dental records and other things. Those are things that they're likely looking at right now to see if there's an easier way and a fast track to identifying who this person was.
Yeah, and not to get too graphic or gruesome, but it does appear that it's not just bones that we're talking about. The chief, even assistant chief, corrected himself. He says it was a foot and a shin bone, and he said, no, actually, it's a foot and a shin that was sticking out. So we don't know exactly what we're looking at, and as you said, he said it was wrapped in a burlap kind of material. So a lot of work to be done out here, some careful work. They're going to be out here for several hours.
Now, several agencies, including the FBI, are working this case.
There's still so much that we don't know at this hour. Investigators, they spent several hours in these frigid cold temperatures processing that scene, looking for critical clues that could help them determine who this person was and who may have put them there. Construction crews hired to renovate a home in a quiet neighborhood at the intersection of St. Martin's and Woodingham made an awful discovery Monday afternoon.
And you can see part of the ground was disturbed. And then you discovered the foot.
I came outside, got pulled in the driveway, came out to see what happened. Nobody was really talking at first. Someone did finally say that they found a child, a shallow grave with a child in it. That's what we were told.
And that was by police?
Mm-hmm.
Police did not comment on the age or gender of the victim, but did say they are working in tandem with the FBI's Missing and Exploited Children's Task Force. Investigators say they've enlisted the help of an anthropologist as they worked ever so carefully to exhume the remains from the frozen ground.
That identification process, whether it be through dental records, whether it be through possible DNA, if that's able to be obtained, and then overlaying that with any missing person records, should be able to get us a running start to find out who this person is.
And there is no timeline on how long that identification process could take in this situation. As for that house and who lived there, the neighbor that we spoke to said it had sat vacant for some time. She does recall a family having lived there before. Again, police asking anyone with any information that may help to give them a call. I actually spoke to one of the construction workers who made that discovery over the phone earlier today. today, and he is still trying to process what he saw here.
It's as if nothing happened here at all, but if you look close, you'll see the signs that this was the scene of an unthinkable tragedy.
It hurts because knowing that it could be a kid.
Nadia Morris looked on Monday as investigators with DPD and the FBI slowly worked to dig up human remains from a shallow grave found in back of a vacant home on St. Martin's and Woodingham on Detroit's west side. Drone 4 shows us the narrow area between a fence and detached garage where those remains were found by construction workers. Detroit police declined to comment Tuesday, but Local 4 crime and safety expert Darnell Blackburn shared his thoughts on the tough job ahead.
In general, it's always a tough thing to do, but when you're starting with potentially an infant or a child, identifying that of a child, it becomes a lot more difficult.
Morris says it's been some time since anyone had lived there.
From seeing them, they seem like a happy family other than, common arguments that couples have.
But it's not clear if that family is at all connected to the remains or how long they've been there. DPD said Monday they've enlisted the help of the FBI and are working in tandem with the Missing and Exploited Children's Task Force.
Let's start with the beginning of knocking on doors and contacting neighbors.
I do want to clarify something. That family, that neighbor is referring to, lived here a year ago, but what we're hearing from residents is that someone else had lived in this home more recently. In fact, one neighbor who did not want to go on camera said that a mother lived there with her child and that sometime back in November, she loaded up her car and that was the last time he saw her. Certainly one of the many things that police are looking at right now as they work with the home's owner, likely to identify who rented that property.
You might remember it was just a few weeks ago when police found human remains at this home on Detroit's west side.
And now they believe that those remains are those of a 9-year-old boy and his mother. This woman right here, 41-year-old Brandee Pierce, is charged with his murder.
So we want to get to the details of this horrible case first and then listen closely to the reaction we are getting from people who know this mom.
I have stood at this podium many times and talked about how horrific, tragic, and shocking certain cases are. Each time thinking there are some future alleged facts that could be worse than what I'm talking about at the time. Knowing all the while, though, that there's always a worse set of facts on the horizon.
And those set of facts are sickening. Another child murdered, 9-year-old Zemar King, allegedly at the hands of his mother, 41-year-old Brandee Pierce. Sources telling me Pierce put her little boy into a chokehold, killed him, and buried his body back in October. It was on January 6th, a child's foot was seen sticking out of the ground on the side of this home on Woodingham.
It's alleged that she purchased a shovel. She bound him by tying his hands and feet together and dug a hole in the background of the house on Woodingham, where she had been living for a short time. She then put him in this hole and covered him with dirt.
Once Zemar's remains were identified, his mother was found being held in Cobb County, Georgia, on drug and theft charges.
This case is rather shocking. In my 27-year career, I don't remember seeing anything like this.
That shallow grave is still there. People who knew the mother walked up to see that grave with me.
That's awful. That really breaks my heart because I got a 9-year-old at home and I can't imagine a baby being in that hole.
I've got 8.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. In fact, we've backed off of that house in that area on the west side. The grave is still open there. It is just too disturbing to be near and look at. As far as Pierce goes, the mom, she's in Georgia. She'll be brought back here to face those murder charges and child abuse charges. She has a 3-year-old who is safe in foster care tonight.
This Detroit mother is charged after a disturbing discovery was made in a Detroit neighborhood. 41-year-old Brandee Pierce is now charged with murder after that discovery. Take a look at video from last month. 1 month ago, in fact, we were on the scene of police finding human bones in the backyard here on Detroit's west side. And now we're learning it was the body of her 9-year-old son.
Too many attacks on our children.
Yes.
It's nonstop. And then here, why? And she moved to Georgia, allegedly, and left him there.
That's terrible. And I'm glad they caught her. I'm glad they caught her.
A woman who knew Brandee Pierce reacting with me while seeing that shallow grave Pierce is now accused of burying her 9-year-old son Zemar in after allegedly choking the boy to death.
I didn't even know she had children. I've never seen children here, no signs of children, nothing. I can't say she was a nice lady. I can't say she was a bad lady, but that's terrible. And people don't do stuff like that.
The timeline, early January, the landlord of this home on Woodingham saw a child's foot sticking out of the ground. Identified as Zemar King, it was determined his mother allegedly killed him and buried him back in October. Brandee Pierce was found just days ago being held on drug and theft charges down in Georgia. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy says the motive here is known, but will not be shared until Pierce is brought back to Detroit.
I am not going to do that. You'll find out in court.
Find out about that motive in court when Pierce is brought back here from Georgia. It's unknown when that will happen. It will be soon. He's facing murder and child abuse charges. There's a shallow grave right over there. People coming up to me, with me to take a look at it. Breathtaking how awful this is. There are gasps. So how could this happen? How could this happen to a little boy? How can a mother allegedly do this to her 9-year-old son? Let's go to the video here and the new photos we have here. This is Brandee Pierce. People in the neighborhood know of her. Never saw her with any children, however. She's in custody down on Georgia. She was arrested on a couple of other different charges a few weeks ago. She's been hit here at home with multiple charges of murder, multiple charges of child abuse. It's just heartbreaking. For allegedly killing her son, Zemar King, and burying the 9-year-old's remains at home here on Woodingham in Detroit. January 6th, a landlord saw a child's foot sticking out of the dirt, kind of on the side of the home here. Then the boy's remains were in a shallow grave discovered here, and they were there. Prosecutors and investigators believe since last October. Sources tell me Pierce allegedly put her son into a chokehold. The son was on the autism spectrum. Sources also tell me mom allegedly killed him, buried him, moved to Georgia.
It's alleged that she purchased a shovel. She bound him by tying his hands and feet together and dug a hole in the background of the house on Woodingham, where she had been living for a short time. She then put him in this hole and covered him with dirt. That after killing her son, she and her other son, who was 3 years old, moved to Georgia.
Brandee Pierce is under arrest in Georgia. At some point, she'll be extradited back here to Wayne County to face these murder charges. She's being held on separate charges there. 3-year-old son apparently is okay. He is now in foster care here in the Detroit area. There's a father of Zemar King, and he apparently had no contact with the son. And investigators were able to find him actually as early as this morning to let him know that these charges were coming and that his son was no longer with us.
I have stood at this podium many, many times and talked about how horrific, tragic, and shocking certain cases are. Each time thinking there are some future alleged facts that could be worse than what I'm talking about at the time. Knowing all the while, though, that there's always a worse set of facts on the horizon. Well, that day has come again. So I want to talk about a case of a young boy named Zemar King III. The alleged facts in this case are that we are announcing today. On January 6th of 2025, the Detroit Police Department was notified and summoned to a house on Woodingham in Detroit. They had been contacted by the landlord that owned that house. When he went to that house, the landlord contacted him when he went to that house to prepare it for a new tenant. Then he called the police because he found a shallow grave in the backyard of the home on Woodingham. Upon arrival, the police were shown that grave where a human foot was sticking out of the ground. The foot was believed to be belonged to a small child. After an extensive investigation, the buried body was discovered to be 9-year-old Zemar King III. That the mother of young Zemar was 41-year-old Brandee Pierce. It's alleged that she killed him and that the cause of death found by the medical examiner was smothering and neck compression. It's alleged that she purchased a shovel. She bound him by tying his hands and feet together and dug a hole in the background of the house on Woodingham, where she had been living for a short time. She then put him in this hole and covered him with dirt. That after killing her son, she and her other son, who was 3 years old, moved to Georgia, Cobb County to be exact. It was determined that this in fact happened sometime in October of 2024. That Zemar's mother, Brandee Pierce, is currently in Cobb County, Georgia, and we will be requesting her to be extradited back to Michigan. We are charging Brandee Katrice Pierce today with 1 count of murder in the first degree premeditation, which carries a life without parole sentence, mandatory. Count 2 is homicide felony murder. Again, the mandatory penalty is life in prison without the possibility of parole. Our 3rd count is child abuse in the first degree, life or any term of years in prison. The first degree child abuse is the felony to make out the felony murder we are alleging. Count 4 is tampering with evidence, criminal case punishable by more than 10 years in prison. And the 5th one is interfering with, concealing and interfering with the death of an individual, 5 years, of course, that being 9-year-old Zemar King. As always, this defendant is presumed innocent and unless or until proven guilty. I should tell you that Judge Aaliyah Sabri of the 36th District Court authorized these charges yesterday. And since we will be requesting extradition, we will notify you all when in fact she is back in the state of Michigan. So of course there is no next day for court. Again, let me just repeat, these charges and allegations are quite serious. They're deadly. They're shocking, every platitude that you can think of. But again, Ms. Pierce is still presumed to be innocent unless or until proven guilty.
Thank you, Madam Prosecutor. As Madam Prosecutor said, this case is rather shocking. In my 27-year career, I don't remember seeing anything like this, but the Detroit Police Department works relentlessly on behalf of victims, and we are confident that there will be accountability for this.
It seems to all of us who do this work on a daily basis that there's been just a large number of tragic cases that have happened to our children, worse than we have seen. So it's our hope that we don't continue to see these, but I know that's probably false hope that I'm having.
Not that you guys needed it to get a charging decision, but any indication as to a possible motive in this case?
You know, I don't talk about motives at the time. Any further evidence and charging decision will come out when we go to court. We can't comment on that at this time.
Has there been any communication with Zemar's mother at all from you guys?
We did speak with his father yesterday, actually this morning, actually. So yes, we have had contact with the family, and the Detroit Police Department has had contact with the family as well.
So forgive me, I must be confused because I'm not listening close enough, so I apologize, but the relationship of the suspect to the child?
Mother. 41-year-old Brandee Pierce was his mother.
And did Zemar's father live in Michigan?
He lives in this area, yes.
And was he aware of his child's death?
Again, we talked to him. I don't think he was aware until recently, but again, we did speak with him this morning. And we'll be speaking with him, of course, further as time goes on.
Those are her two kids, Zemar and the 3-year-old?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Prosecutor, where's the 3-year-old right now?
Again, he's with his mother in Georgia right now, and he was, and now he's in foster care here, I believe.
Can you foster care locally?
Yep.
Are you able to provide any further information on the timeline of, you mentioned October, and then what?
That'll come out in court.
But in regard to how she ends up in Georgia with the other child, or with...
All I can tell you at this point in time is she left shortly after she buried the body in the backyard and went to the state of Georgia.
So the landlord call to DPD was on January 6th?
The landlord call was on January 6th. The police were notified. They immediately went out to the house on Woodingham. They were shown that grave by the owner of that particular property. They saw the foot sticking out of the ground, and it went from there. The chief notified me immediately upon that discovery.
She had rented that home?
I assume she rented it. I don't know.
Can you speak to this at all? I'll just read this verbatim. The source indicated yesterday that the mother claims they were horsing around and playing some sort of choking game.
I'm not going to comment on the evidence in the case.
Also, was this case file sent over to you guys more than once at all? And if so, what elements were needed to get to a charging decision?
Oh, we're not going to talk about that. The police contact us when they have information. We talk often back and forth. And then once we get a completed investigation, we make a charging decision.
Do you know how long the mom had been living at that rental house?
For a short period of time. It's a very short period of time. Thank you, everybody. Oh, do you have something else?
Well, I think I know the answer to your question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. My question is, potentially this was accidental, somebody panics and then leaves the state. Intentional? Are you able to offer anything in regard to intent or non-intent?
I am not going to do that. You'll find out in court.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
A tragic loss and heartbreaking discovery as we learn more tonight about a Detroit mother charged with killing her 9-year-old son.
And tonight, police say the arrest made months ago may have saved the life of a 3-year-old child. This is the mugshot for 41-year-old Brandee Pierce. She faces murder and child abuse charges in Detroit, accused of smothering her 9-year-old son, Zemar, and burying him in the backyard.
New arrest warrants show police arrested Pierce in Brookhaven back in December for child cruelty against her 3-year-old. Police say Pierce told them they were homeless and living out of a rental car at the time. Police say that arrest in December likely saved her youngest child's life.
Well, police immediately contacted other authorities back when this arrest happened, as this child, this 3-year-old Zor, was being checked out at a hospital in Metro Atlanta. Now, back then, Pierce told police that she had come to Metro Atlanta for a fresh start with her 3-year-old. This just months after prosecutors in Detroit say she killed her 9-year-old son and buried him.
October 2024.
The cause of death found by the medical examiner was smothering and neck compression.
A gruesome death.
It's alleged that she purchased a shovel. She bound him by tying his hands and feet together and dug a hole in the background of the house on Woodingham, where she had been living for a short time.
Detroit prosecutors say 41-year-old Brandee Pierce killed her 9-year-old son Zemar. His remains not found until January 6th this year, buried behind a garage at the rental home where she lived with him and 3-year-old Zor. Neighbors shocked to learn what happened there.
It's sad, though. It's really sad that that happened.
Sources say the landlord found the home empty 2 days before Thanksgiving. Pierce left to Georgia with her 3-year-old, but was arrested in Brookhaven at a Dollar General for cruelty to children. Officers found Zor in the front seat, naked. Documents show both front seats were pulled forward, a small deflated air mattress placed in the middle. Pierce was arrested again by Cobb County deputies on January 10th for possession of a controlled substance and theft. Back in Detroit,
we are charging Brandee Katrice Pierce today with 1 count of murder in the first degree premeditation. Count 2 is homicide felony murder.
Pierce is being held here at the Cobb County Jail on a $15,000 bond. Officials in Michigan are working on getting her extradited back there so she can face those charges related to the death of her 9-year-old son.
We are learning more about a Detroit mother charged with the killing of her 9-year-old son. Police say an arrest made months ago may have saved the life of a 3-year-old child. 41-year-old Brandee Pierce faces murder and child abuse charges in Detroit. She's accused of smothering her 9-year-old son Zemar and burying him in the backyard. New arrest warrants show police arrested Pierce in Brookhaven in December for child cruelty against her 3-year-old. Police say Pierce told them they were homeless and living out of a rental car at the time.
Detroit prosecutors say 41-year-old Brandee Pierce killed her 9-year-old son Zemar. His remains not found until January 6th this year, buried behind a garage at the rental home where she lived with him and 3-year-old Zor. Sources say the landlord found the home empty 2 days before Thanksgiving. Pierce left to Georgia with her 3-year-old, but was arrested in Brookhaven. Back in Detroit,
we are charging Brandee Katrice Pierce today with 1 count of murder in the first degree premeditation. Count 2 is homicide felony murder.
Right now, Pierce is in the Cobb County Jail on a $15,000 bond. Officials in Michigan are moving forward with extradition efforts so she can face charges in connection to the 9-year-old's death.
Now, a Detroit woman is in custody in Cobb County accused of killing her 9-year-old son. 41-year-old Brandee Pierce buried him in the backyard before fleeing here to Georgia.
Well, Pierce was originally arrested on January 10th at the Cumberland Mall. Authorities say she was driving a stolen rental car. Right now, she's in custody here at the Cobb County Jail. Michigan authorities want her back in their jurisdiction so they can charge her with murder and also child cruelty. Pierce is accused of killing her son, Zemar King, in October of 2024 and burying his remains in the backyard of the home she was renting. Sources tell our sister station in Detroit, Michigan, that neighbors saw Pierce acting strangely. They did not think a crime occurred. Construction crews discovered a shallow grave while renovating the home on January 6th of this year. Police believe Pierce fled with another child, her 3-year-old son, here to Georgia. We understand he is currently in foster care. For right now, Michigan authorities are moving forward with extraditing her back to the state.
This case is rather shocking. In my 27-year career, I don't remember seeing anything like this.
A mother is facing charges in the death of her 9-year-old son. Body was found smothered, bound and buried in a shallow grave in Detroit.
It was a gruesome discovery by a landlord that led to this police investigation here off of Woodingham Drive in Detroit. We were told by investigators that a landlord was prepping this rental property for a new tenant when he went to the backyard and he saw a 9-year-old child's foot sticking out of a shallow grave. His name is Zemar King, and he was 9 years old when investigators say his mom, Brandee Katrice Pierce, killed him and buried him in their backyard back in October of last year. Their landlord made the discovery January of this year after the family had allegedly already moved to Georgia, which is where they are now. The house is on Woodingham Drive in Detroit, 2 blocks from St. Martin's Park. Detroit police arrived to discover the remains of Zemar, and the medical examiner's office ruled the death to be a homicide by smothering and compression to the neck.
These charges and allegations are quite serious. They're deadly. They're shocking, every platitude that you can think of. But again, Ms. Pierce is still presumed to be innocent unless and until proven guilty.
Pierce's charges include first-degree murder, felony murder, and first-degree child abuse, among others. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy said Pierce moved to Georgia with her 3-year-old son, who is now in Child Protective Services custody. Worthy has requested Pierce be extradited back to Michigan. Detroit Police Chief Todd Bettison says this is the worst case he's seen in his more than 25-year career.
And we are confident that there will be accountability for this.
It is believed Pierce was renting this home and moved down to Georgia in November of last year. Prosecutor Kim Worthy told us that she just notified Zemar's dad this morning about the charges against Pierce.
The remains of a boy were found buried in his backyard, and now his mother has been charged in connection to his death.
If you don't want the child, don't have a child, or give a child to people who wants children. But to hurt a child, you sad. You are real sad.
The news of a child being killed by his mother has many reacting. It all started as a landlord prepared this home on Woodingham Drive for new tenants. That's when they found a foot sticking out of the ground. Prosecutors identify the remains as 9-year-old Zemar King, the person allegedly responsible, King's mother, 41-year-old Brandee Katrice Pierce.
She never really came out. Those kids never came out. I have seen her come out with that 3-year-old, the youngest child, but I've never seen this older child ever.
Pierce reportedly took off to Georgia in November with her other child, a 3-year-old boy. We've learned she ended up having a run-in with police near Atlanta after someone spotted the toddler alone in the car with no clothes on. All the while, Brookhaven police say Pierce was attempting to sell plasma nearby.
Very rarely you even saw her.
Neighbors back here in Detroit say the family only lived in the home for several weeks before leaving. They say they never saw Zemar outside. It's unclear what school the child attended, but sources say he wasn't enrolled in Detroit public schools.
Whether it be a woman, a man, whatever, we are the ones to protect our children first.
Prosecutors say Zemar's father has since been notified. It's believed the child had been buried since October. Now, Pierce is set to be extradited back to Michigan, while we've also learned her second child is with Child Protective Services.
Well, turning now to a heartbreaking story on Detroit's west side, where a mother is charged in the murder of her 9-year-old son. Zemar King's remains were discovered in the backyard of his home on Woodingham Drive near Outer Drive in Livernois last month. But today we learn this tragic case stretches back even further.
Investigators believe they've gotten to the bottom of a grim discovery at this home on the city's west side. A little boy's body was found buried behind this garage. His mother is now accused of killing him. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy levying charges against 41-year-old Brandee Pierce for the murder of her 9-year-old son.
The cause of death found by the medical examiner was smothering and neck compression.
Authorities believe it happened in October of last year. Zemar's remains were not found until January 6th of this year, buried behind a garage at the rental home on Woodingham, where Pierce lived with Zemar and her other son, said to be 3 years old. Sources tell me Pierce moved into the house in early September of 2024. One neighbor who did not want to be identified recalled an encounter with Pierce back in early November. She knew something was wrong. It was a month after authorities say Zemar was murdered.
As a woman, I'm looking, I'm like, are you okay? She's like, yeah, and then she would stand there, and then she would walk back. She'd stand there, walk back. So maybe something was wrong with her, I don't know. Or maybe she was dealing with the issue of what she did.
Sources tell me the landlord went to the home to do some maintenance 2 days before Thanksgiving and found the home vacant. Pierce fled the state to Georgia with her 3-year-old son, where Worthy says he is now in foster care. Public records show Pierce was arrested in Brookhaven, Georgia, for cruelty to children in the first degree on December 20th. Pierce was arrested again in Cobb County, Georgia, on January 10th for possession of a controlled substance and theft. Meanwhile, here in Wayne County,
we are charging Brandee Katrice Pierce today.
Did officials with Children's Protective Services miss blaring warnings that could have saved the life of a 9-year-old Detroit boy?
His remains were found buried in a backyard at a home in January. The boy's mother was charged with his murder on February 5th.
7 investigator Ross Jones is revealing internal CPS records, raising serious questions about what officials did and did not do when they heard alarming claims about the child's safety.
We identified some human remains, someone small in stature. Extremely sad day.
The scene at Woodingham and St. Martin's in Detroit was enough to shake even career police officers. The body of a child found buried in a shallow grave. It took days for officers to determine that the boy was 9-year-old Zemar King, murdered, prosecutors say, by his mother, Brandee Pierce. But as unspeakable as the alleged crime was, it did not come out of nowhere.
It's just a train wreck that's going to happen, right? You just see it coming, and they don't do anything about it.
But we've obtained internal CPS records that show state employees were warned for years that Zemar was in danger. At least 4 times, records show, Brandee Pierce was the subject of CPS complaints, the first coming in 2015, after Pierce admitted to marijuana and alcohol use during her first trimester. It happened, she said, before she decided to keep Zemar. There were complaints in 2019 and 2021, both alleging that Zemar had been left alone, the first time in the lobby of a Southfield apartment building, with Zemar telling police he did not know where he belonged. Police later made contact with a relative and the complaint was denied. 2 years later, on a 78-degree day in May, Zemar was left alone in his mother's locked car for more than 90 minutes while she went to a doctor's appointment. She told police her son was a heavy sleeper and claimed doctors wouldn't let him into her appointment.
It's the pattern, right? Here is a mom, again, where she's repeatedly reported by different people in the community.
Frank Vandervoort is a law professor at the University of Michigan and a longtime child welfare advocate who said Pierce's pattern of behavior and the disclosure that she was receiving mental health services on an almost daily basis should have been a red flag to CPS.
That suggests to me a very severe level of mental health need. So I'm troubled by that, and it raises more questions than it answers for us.
The Macomb County prosecutor denied a warrant request for child abuse, saying there was insufficient evidence and CPS working with mom. CPS would close the case after performing a home visit, finding no safety hazards, enough food, and suitable sleeping arrangements. Then, last April, came the 4th complaint to CPS. This time, Pierce would come here to this Plymouth Hospital emergency room, reporting she was anxious and depressed. Pierce told CPS she had a breakdown and felt herself going into a panic attack. She was questioning whether she should give up custody of one of her children. She'd been evicted from a motel, she said. Her car was repossessed. She was completely out of funds. Once she left the hospital, she and her kids would be sleeping on the street.
On its own, how serious is that?
Critical. This is a family with no place to live. She tells the caseworker, I can't sleep in my car, which suggests to me that she's been sleeping in her car at some points.
But what Zemar told CPS was most alarming of all. He had not been to school in over a year, he said, and doesn't always have food to eat. He said his mother beat him with a belt, that she's choked him with her hands, and that she wants to kill him.
Any rational, normal person walking out on the street hearing this would be completely alarmed by what they're hearing. They would take action. They would call the police.
But what CPS did, according to internal records, was close the case. The investigation found no preponderance of evidence of physical neglect. Pierce was provided with pamphlets connecting her with community services, and a note was added to follow up on her mental health appointments. 6 months later, after Zemar reported that his mother choked and wanted to kill him, prosecutors say she did.
It's alleged that she killed him, and that the cause of death found by the medical examiner was smothering and neck compression.
CPS records show that the family was placed at a homeless shelter after that final complaint last April. It is not clear how long they were there. Then in December, Brandee Pierce was found in Georgia. She was arrested after someone reported finding her other child, a 3-year-old, locked in a car alone. Police said temperatures were in the 40s, the child was nude, and there was feces and a deflated air mattress in the vehicle. Citing state and federal law, CPS said they could not comment on this case, but they are heartbroken by Zemar's death and are committed to ensuring the health and safety of all children. Beyond horrific. And we asked CPS, is the employee who handled that last investigation, what is their status? Are they working today? Are they under investigation? Were they disciplined? They said they couldn't comment, but there are many, many questions that need to be asked about this.
I mean, it leaves you speechless, and my stomach is just turning over. Where is that mom? She's locked up right now, or she's getting help?
It is unclear whether or not she's still in Georgia. They have to move her to Michigan so she can be arraigned. Her whereabouts right now are not entirely clear, but she is under arrest.
And her other children are safe,
yes,
as far as we know.
State custody right now.
So many missed red flags.
Back in April of 2024, the defendant and her 2 children went to a hospital for help. CPS got involved. Zemar told CPS that his mother chokes him and wants to kill him. Fast forwarding to October of 2024, the defendant and her 2 children are living in Detroit on Woodingham. The defendant orders a shovel and a wagon from Walmart. She digs a hole in her backyard behind her garage. Later in October, I believe October 24th, Zemar wakes up early, as would be usual for him.
. We believe that the evidence will show that the defendant smothered and suffocated Zemar. She digs a hole in her backyard behind her garage. Later in October, I believe October 24th, Zemar wakes up early, as would be usual for him. We believe that the evidence will show that the defendant smothered and suffocated Zemar.
and that the defendant heard his last gasping breath and decided to walk away. That when the defendant came back from Mar, he was blue. And instead of helping him, she decided to bind his arms and legs, put him in a wagon, and take him out to the hole that she had in her backyard and bury him. The callousness with which the defendant treated Zemar cannot be understated. The defendant is an absolute danger to the community and a threat. After the killing, the defendant took herself and her other son to Illinois, Wisconsin, and then down to Georgia, where the defendant resided. The defendant was subsequently arrested 2 times in Georgia for crimes involving her other son and drugs. We had captured by her back this warrant. So people believe he
Thank you. Your response,
Judge, so on behalf of Ms. Pierce, I can tell you that she's 46 years old. She's not employed at this time, Your Honor. She has absolutely no income. She does suffer from disorders that I'm not aware of she's received her medication for. I can tell you that in talking to her, we understand that she's received a master's degree as well. Ultimately, Your Honor, you know, I think we've all been so there we go. So ultimately, Your Honor, when it comes to bond, I think it's important to know that it's easy to, you know, read up a police report and read the most egregious allegations and then confine somebody to jail. What I'm asking the court to do here is to use the least restrictive means possible and confine her to a homeless shelter. She would ultimately, any concerns that the prosecutor or the court would have would be addressed with a home confinement GPS tether to a homeless shelter. She is homeless, Your Honor. I don't think it's appropriate for me to even argue the facts in this case at this stage. But when it comes to ties to the community or flight risk, I hear what the prosecutor is saying, that she wasn't found in another state. I still think a tether addresses that. So my ultimate request, Your Honor, is to release her on a reasonable bond, confining her to a homeless shelter.
Thank you. After listening to the arguments of the parties, the court has had an opportunity to review the investigator's report and take into consideration the background information that has been presented by defense counsel. The court certainly is concerned. Not only is Ms. Pierce a danger to the community, but also a flight risk. After these egregious acts or allegations, she left the state, was in Illinois, Wisconsin, and then found in Georgia. So a flight risk, that's pretty much clear. As it relates to being a danger, as Ms. Ripley indicated, the facts are just egregious in terms of how this child was found, the condition, being tied, body having been decomposed, the prior information that was submitted in terms of the contact with Child Protective Services, and based on that information, she definitely poses a threat to the community. So the court believes that based on the information, finds through clear and convincing evidence that she is a danger. Also, that based upon the information that has been set forth in the investigator's report, it appears that the presumption of guilt is high, and the court is going to remand this matter pursuant to MRE 6.106B1I. So, Ms. Pierce, the court's going to set a remand in this case. Is there anything else
Thank you,
from
Judge.
the people?
No, Judge, just looking for
I'm going to give the court dates in a moment. Anything else from you, Mr. Varner?
Okay.
I don't have any further at this time, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Then we have 2 dates, Ms. Pierce. You have a probable cause conference that's scheduled for March the 7th at 8:30. That will be by Zoom. You also have the right to a preliminary examination, which is scheduled for March the 13th at 1:45 p.m. Now that matter will be conducted in person. Both of those matters are scheduled before Judge Takei in the 36th District Court. So there's nothing further than just conclusive.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Judge.
Right. Good afternoon, Ms. Pierce.
Denied bond after being formally charged with the murder of her own 9-year-old son.
And that comes after his remains were found buried in the backyard of a home. She was arrested down south, out of state, right?
She was arrested in Georgia. She's now in Michigan facing serious charges. Today, the court calling her a flight risk and a threat to the community.
The court is calling case number 25055.
It's another disturbing case to come before the court. A mother, 41-year-old Brandee Pierce, accused of smothering and killing her son, Zemar.
Zemar King was a 9-year-old child who was treated like he was a piece of garbage. He deserved better.
Police say Pierce killed Zemar last October. Last month, his remains were found in a shallow grave in the backyard of their Detroit home. Prosecutors say she dug the grave weeks before killing him.
The defendant orders a shovel and a wagon from Walmart. She digs a hole in her backyard behind her garage.
They also talked about prior run-ins with CPS.
Zemar told CPS that his mother chokes him and wants to kill him.
Denying bond, the court ruled Pierce a flight risk, saying she fled to Georgia after killing her son. They also called her a danger to the community. Pierce is facing several charges, including first-degree murder.
The remains of Zemar King were found buried in a backyard home in January. Zemar's mother, Brandee Pierce, facing a judge today, charged with 5 counts, including first-degree murder.
The 7 investigators finding Brandee Pierce was the subject of a Child Protective Services complaint at least 4 times.
6 months later, Zemar was dead.
Pierce arrived in Detroit Thursday evening, 16 days after the Wayne County prosecutor first announced those charges. She's being held without bond.
The people of the state of Michigan versus Brandee Katrice Pierce.
Brandee Katrice Pierce stood stone-faced during a video arraignment Friday. The 41-year-old mother was recently extradited from Georgia to formally face charges for the murder of her 9-year-old son, Zemar King. Assistant prosecuting attorney Tina Ripley asked the court to keep Pierce behind bars.
Zemar King was a 9-year-old child who was treated like he was a piece of garbage.
Rayad Murad, Pierce's attorney, says she suffers from mental disorders that she may not have taken her medication for.
It's easy to, read off a police report and read the most egregious allegations and then confine somebody to jail. What I'm asking the court to do here is to use the least restrictive means possible and confine her to a homeless shelter.
Pierce was the subject of 4 CPS complaints. The records show Pierce admitted to using marijuana and alcohol while pregnant with Zemar. The boy was found wandering alone in the lobby of an apartment building when he was 4 years old. 2 years later, Zemar was left alone in a locked vehicle in 78-degree weather. And last April, the boy told CPS he had not been to school in more than a year. He sometimes has no food to eat and that his mother whoops him, choked him, and wants to kill him.
October of 2024, we believe that the evidence will show that the defendant smothered and suffocated. The defendant heard his last gasping breath and decided to walk away.
Investigators say Pierce fled Michigan with her other son and ultimately landed in Georgia. Police there arrested Pierce for leaving the boy locked in a rental car for about an hour while the temperature was in the low 40s. Police say the boy was naked, his skin cold to the touch, and there was feces in the car.
The defense attorney for a Detroit mother accused of killing her 9-year-old son is requesting a competency exam for her client. Brandee Pierce faces a first-degree murder charge. Police believe last October, Pierce smothered her son, Zemar, before tying him up and burying him in a shallow grave behind a home in Detroit. Landlords discovered his remains in January while preparing the property for new tenants. Pierce's competency evaluation is scheduled for review on May 13th.
And tonight, questions are swirling over the role Child Protective Services played in the death of a 9-year-old Detroit boy.
For weeks, we've been following the tragic story of Zemar King, who was found buried in a shallow grave. His mother's accused of killing him before running away to Georgia.
Well, now the father of that boy is speaking out for the first time about the warning signs he says were missed.
And a former deputy attorney general tells the 7 investigators that prosecutors should be looking into what we first revealed. Here's 7 investigator Ross Jones.
He didn't deserve this. He already stated what was going on in the house.
6 months before Zemar King would be found buried in a Detroit backyard, he told a Children's Protective Services caseworker that his mother, Brandee Pierce, beat him with a belt, choked him with her hands, and wanted to kill him.
Zemar King was a 9-year-old child who was treated like he was a piece of garbage. The callousness with which the defendant treated Zemar cannot be understated.
Tonight, Zemar King's father sits in disbelief. How, he asks, could state watchdogs not protect his son after what he told them?
I don't expect that because I respect that CPS will take action.
Derek Brown only learned Zemar was his son through his death. A DNA test after they found his body confirmed it. Derek had been in a relationship with Brandee Pierce a decade earlier, but said they lost touch until about 2 years ago, when he says Pierce showed up out of the blue with Zemar.
I wanted to meet with you so I could tell you this is your son.
This picture is from the day they met, when Brown said Pierce made him an offer.
She told me that I could take him. She'll switch everything to me. I asked her, is something wrong? She said no, she just feel that she took on a lot.
Brown said he agreed to take Zemar, but wanted to take a DNA test first. They scheduled one for the following week, but Pierce later canceled it, he said, and left for California.
Did you ever see Zemar again?
No.
2 years later, a CPS caseworker would be called to this Plymouth hospital after Pierce arrived in the midst of a mental health crisis. She said she was homeless, questioning whether she should give up custody of one of her boys. That's when Zemar told CPS the family often had no food, he hadn't been to school in a year, and that his mother beats him. But a CPS caseworker concluded there wasn't enough evidence to substantiate a neglect complaint. The family was placed in a homeless shelter, and the case against Pierce was closed. Tonight, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services will not say whether that caseworker is under investigation or facing any discipline.
Not every time a government employee makes a mistake or does something wrong, does the government then prosecute them. However, there are certain circumstances, at least the issue should be reviewed. And this is one of those cases.
Matthew Schneider is a former U.S. attorney for Michigan's Eastern District, and before that, he was Deputy Attorney General for the state.
There is not a doubt in my mind, if I were still the Deputy Attorney General, I would be looking for the reports in this case. I would want to know what happened, and should law enforcement get heavily involved in investigating and looking at this case and contemplating whether or not charges should be brought.
Schneider says there are 2 charges a prosecutor would most likely consider: willful neglect of duty, a misdemeanor charge that was brought against Rick Snyder and others as part of the Flint water crisis, and misconduct in office, a felony charge that carries up to 5 years in prison. There is no sign tonight that either the Attorney General or the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office are reviewing how CPS handled this case.
The facts are is that the little boy is telling the CPS worker, I'm getting whooped with a belt. I don't have a place to live. I don't get enough food to eat. I don't feel safe all the time. And it looks like the system broke down.
Whether criminal charges are brought won't mean much to Derek Brown. Earlier this month, he buried the son he only recently learned was his, and says he can't shake the thought of the 9-year-old's final cries for help.
I would have took him with no question asked. If he would have said all that, I would have found ways to take him.
We reached out to Brandee Pierce's attorney for comment, but did not hear back. According to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, Pierce was just referred for a competency evaluation and won't be back in a courtroom until May.